This is the video for October the 19th in the year 2025. I call it Rome and Viper. Once Paul and Dr. Luke and Aristarchus had swam to the shore, they found out that the island they were on was called Malta. And the people of Malta were very kind to Paul and his friends and the other prisoners and the centurion that was in charge of him. And they said, "You're wet and it's cold. It's the rainy season. Let's make a fire." So they built a fire. And Paul took a big pile of brush in his arms and took it over and threw it on the fire. You know, brush is like the tiny little sticks that you use when you're making a fire at the very beginning. And he went and threw them on the fire. And there was a viper, which is a poisonous snake, that was in that wood. And the poisonous snake was wrapped around his arm and it bit him. And the people from Malta said, "Oh, this man must be a murderer. The sea didn't kill him. So now he's going to die because he's a bad guy." And so they said, when we get bit by those vipers, we die right away. So they watched him and they watched him and they watched him. Paul didn't die. Then they said, "He must be a god. He must be a god. He didn't die from the viper's bite. He must be a god." And so they went from one extreme where they think he's a murderer to the other extreme where they think he's a god. And he had to dissuade them. There's no way I'm a god. But let me tell you my story. And you know that Paul told the same story that he always tells. The governor of that island was named Publius. And Publius welcomed Paul and Dr. Luke and Aristarchus into his house for 3 days. And while he was there, Publius's dad got sick with dysentery and he had a fever. You've had a fever before, haven't you? So while he has this fever, Paul went in and prayed for him and put his hands on him, and the fever went away, and his dad was able to get up and do the normal stuff. Well, when the people of the island heard that Paul had healed Publius's dad, they brought all their sick people to Paul, and Paul healed them. And then when it was time, 3 months later, to leave the island of Malta, everybody sent them provisions. They had food to take with them, and they went on their way. They got on a big ship, and the big ship stopped at a couple places along the way, but then it comes to Rome. And when it came to Rome, the Jews and the believers that were in Rome already went down the road to meet Paul and walked with him up into Rome, which was a very good thing. When you're all alone in a different country, it feels really nice to have someone who knows you and comes to walk with you. So they walked with him, and it was decided that Paul could rent his own house and stay in a rented house, and there would be a guard to make sure that he didn't go outside or didn't get into any trouble. So he still had a chain on, but he's there in that house, and he calls for the Jewish people to come and talk to him in the house. And when the Jewish people came to talk to him, he told them his story and how he had been persecuting the Jews, but Jesus had talked to him, and he spent the whole day talking to them. And at the end, there were some who believed his story and believed in Jesus, but there were a lot who didn't. And Paul says, you just are like what those Old Testament prophets said. Your hearts are too hard to accept the truth. You see, but you don't really see. You hear, but you don't really hear. You really have too hard of hearts to accept Jesus. And then he says, and so I'm going to tell the Gentiles instead. Now, all we know about Paul after that is that he stayed in that rented house for 2 years. And history says that he was released later, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is that these have been the Acts of the Apostles. And Dr. Luke must not have been there any longer. Maybe Dr. Luke died, or maybe Paul died while he was in prison. We don't know any of that stuff because the Bible doesn't tell us. We could probably look at church history and see what happened, but that's all we know. The memory verse is Is any one of you sick? Let him call the elders of the church to come and pray over him and lay their hands on him and anoint him with oil. And the prayer of the elders of the church is going to make that man well. James 5:14.